Today we've come to the city of Perth and I'm going to take you on a tour around the oldest graveyard in Perth. It's called the Greyfriars graveyard and it was built on the site of a former Franciscan friary. The monks would have wore grey habits, hence the name the Greyfriars. The friary was established in 1560 and it stood here till 1559. Where it was demolished by an angry Perth mob, following a talk by John Knox, the Protestant reformer in St John's Kirk. Now, I did think about moving the shopping trolley, but, well, I think if Morrison's want their trolley back, then they'll know where to find it. The details of the martyrs who suffered death here in 1544 are, there were three men, James Reed, William Anderson and a James Finlayson, and they fixed a ram's head and a cow's tail to an image of St Francis, and for this they were sentenced to death, as was a man called Robert Lamb, who fell out with a friar, and also his wife, who refused to pray to the Virgin Mary. She was called Helen Sark. The men were executed by being hanged, and Helen, well, she was drowned in a pool in the River Tay. Before her execution, her suckling baby was taken from her breast and handed to an onlooker. This was done during the violence during the Reformation in Scotland, when the Catholic faith was replaced by the Protestant. Details of these executions and many more can be found in the book No Fair City, Dark Tales from Perth's Past. I'm quite good friends with the handsome young author. When you enter the graveyard from the Canal Street car park, you'll see this small building. It's now where the council keep their tools, the gardeners, but at one time it would be a watch house. This is where, if somebody was buried in the graveyard, their relatives would either do it themselves within the family or pay watchmen to keep an eye on the grave until the body was decomposed, so it was of no use to the resurrection men, the sack 'em up men, or the grave robbers. There'd be a small fireplace, windows, and that have now been blocked off. The watchmen would often be armed. It'd be a lonely, scary job. And Greyfriars and other graveyards in the area were hit by the resurrection men. In 1724, the town council put a sign up stating that anybody found lifting bodies from Greyfriars would be fined £20 and there'd be a reward of £10 to anyone who informed on the resurrection men. Above the gate is this fantastic carving. It's got a skull, beside that two egg timers, and beneath a sundial. It's all designed to remind you of the passing of time and the fact that you too will one day be dead. Carved above the skull would be the Latin memento mortis, or remember death. You can see it more clearly in this gravestone, also from Greyfriars Cemetery.
Explore Provan Hall after dark.
Is it really haunted?
Join us to find out.
If you dare.
I once had a friend who was telling me about an old graveyard that I used to go and visit quite a lot. And during the conversation, he told me that there was lots and lots of pirates buried there. I asked him why he thought there was pirates there. And he said because a lot of the graves had skull and crossbones on them. Well, of course, it doesn't mean that these people were pirates. Again, it's just to remember that you will be dead at some time, to remind you of the passing of time. Greyfriars is a fantastic cemetery. It's full of Victorian graves, many of them beautifully carved and would have been very expensive in their day. It's pouring with rain today and I think it's quite apt. I like to think back to a time when this cemetery was in use. Crowds dressed in black around each individual grave. Everybody heartbroken and mourning for the person they've lost. Their tears falling from their cheeks and hitting the soil at their feet or hearses pulled by jet black horses with big black feather plumes, waiting patiently on the mourners finishing. Some of the graves, despite being very, very old, are still tended to and the people remembered. This one is for a George Pentland. He was a man who made harnesses for horses, and he died in 1806. But somebody obviously still turns up and puts flowers at his grave. There's lots of different plants and trees in the graveyard here. I think these two weeping willow trees are quite appropriate for a graveyard. I'm going to take you and show you my favourite grave, perhaps my favourite grave anywhere in Scotland. But first I'm going to tell you this wee story. I was doing a tour around the graveyard, and there was one of the visitors on the tour, and she thought it was shocking that they buried somebody in the middle of the path. I had to point out that probably the graves were there before the path had been put in place. I thought that was quite amusing. My favourite grave is beside the Tay Street entrance. There's two entrances to the graveyard. We came in initially in the Canal Street entrance by the car park, but this entrance is looking out onto the river. Here it is. It's my favourite grave, not just here in Greyfriars, but in any cemetery I've ever visited. And it's called the Grieving or Weeping Woman, and it's life size. It must have cost a fortune to carve. It's carved out of one single piece of sandstone, and it depicts a woman who's covered with a shawl and she's crying or weeping. The grave is that of a minister, and he must have been very, very well liked because it was paid for by his congregation and his friends. I love bringing tours in the graveyard because when I come round and show them this particular grave, everybody is completely captivated by it. It's a stunning grave, so atmospheric. Another grave that I like is this one here. It's massive. It must weigh about 3 or 4 tons at least. There's a small grave in front of it, and when I bring school kids here I like to pretend that when they're putting this grave up in place it fell down and it killed a man, and that's the grave in front of it. It's not a true story, but the kids seem to like it. And the grave is that of a surgeon who came from Perth, and he must have been very well liked because, like the minister at the last grave, this grave here was paid for by his friends and his ex-patients. It's absolutely massive, and this would be put in place before you got modern hydraulic cranes. It'd all be done with block and tackle, probably brought up the river by barge. I'm looking forward to showing you this part. For under cover down here is where they've put all the oldest graves, just to protect them against the elements. But they go back to the earliest ones from the 1500s, and most of them are from the 1700s, and they're ornately carved and quite something. So I'm looking forward to showing you this section of the graveyard.
Explore Castle Menzies after dark.
Is it really haunted?
Is it really haunted?
Look now to find out.
If you dare.
This is a grave of someone called Buchan, and it's pretty weathered, but you can just make out the date 1580. So this is the oldest grave in Greyfriars graveyard. This is one of my favourite graves, and it's a grave of Andrew Kippen, who was a deacon of Glovers, and he died in 1761. And glove making was very important in Perth. The Glover Incorporation of Perth started in 1210, and it's still active to this day. You can see a pair of leather gloves, shears, a buckle. The strange looking object above the gloves is a pair of leather breeches or trousers, and that's because that's one of the things apprentice glovers had to make before they were accepted into the trade. This grave is of William Peter. He died in 1753, and his family were carriers, and that's sort of like the haulage company of the day. They'd hire out a cart and a horse, and they'd move stuff around the area. And it's a great carving of a horse, William leading the horse at the front. I mean, look at the carving on this of the ship, it's just incredible. Imagine the time, effort and expense that went into making this headstone. Perth, even today, has got a busy harbour, which is down at Friary, which is about a mile away downstream from the graveyard here. But at one time, the graveyard was right opposite Perth's old harbour. And although Perth's not a coastal city, ships will still come up the River Tay to unload goods in Perth. So there you have it, that's Greyfriars Graveyard. It's a beautiful place to visit, especially at this time of year when the buds are in full bloom. It's breathtaking. I would thoroughly recommend that if you are in Perth for a visit or you stay in the city and you've never come down to the graveyard yet, you pay a visit. There's lots to see, it's nice and peaceful and tranquil. When I was there was a couple of jakies, but you know, they weren't creating any problem at all. In fact, they were quite interested in what I was doing, had a wee bit of blather with them. So it's open between 9 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Not on bank holidays though, because it's run by the council, so it's not open at bank holidays, but I would thoroughly recommend you come down and pay it a visit. If you've enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe. You might like to take one of our dark history tours, ghost tours, or paranormal investigations that are held in Perthshire, Glasgow and Stirling. If so, please visit our website, which is www.historyandhorrortours.com. Thank you.